but I don't think that's laziness. That's making a choice that says, this isn't for me, this is not relevant to me, I'm not interested, or I find this really hard. There's just a whole load of reasons that are going on that aren't actually a sort of physical or mental, I can't be bothered. It's more than that. It's about feeling that it's something that's relevant to you. And I think I was actually thinking today, because I was in Liverpool today, I was on the way back from the Isle of Man, and I was thinking about history, because I know, obviously, and actually my degree's in history, and I was thinking about why is it so many kids just don't really engage with history. And it's because we don't, again, they don't get from so young that the experience of why history is relevant to them. And so then suddenly they're faced with the GCSE, and if they haven't really had that journey and they don't get it from home, like, obviously my kids have been dragged around every castle going, because it's, that's what I love, but there are many children whose only experience of history is quite dry, and it's in school, and so therefore
But
it's not
what
very
evidence
relevant.
what evidence do you have for that, out of interest? Because as a history teacher myself, I think there's a huge amount of really high quality practice going on in primary and secondary.
Yeah.
And I still think at the end of that, you still have students who say, I can't be bothered and I don't want to do it.
No.
So there's nothing to do with the teaching and learning going on.
Yeah, I've never, and honestly, not in one of my tweets have I ever said anything about bad teachers. I completely don't blame teachers for any of this. I would never
But
do
you
that.
have just said, correct me if I'm wrong, that history is taught in a dry way,
Well,
or
I just mean that, no, I don't mean that teachers are delivering it in a dry way. I just mean that the nature of history in school can only, to a certain extent, be quite dry, because in the end it's in a textbook, or it's on a PowerPoint, or maybe it's on a video, or maybe you might have some artifacts, or you might be able to go on the odd school trip. But in the end, it's quite difficult to bring it to life in the way that you would if children, the children who live in homes where it's possible for them to go on holiday and see historical sites, or, it's privilege, isn't it? It's privilege, which means that those children have access. And so when you start teaching them history at GCSE, they have a context, and they've seen things, and they've understood stuff, where the children who've come from maybe more deprived backgrounds, they've only ever seen it in a photograph or on a film. They've never really experienced it properly, and so it doesn't have the same relevance for them. And so I'm not blaming schools or teachers for that per se. I'm just saying, that's a bigger issue with our society, isn't it? But it comes down to the same thing, which is, how can you expect a child who's had such limited experience to really want to engage with, Auschwitz or something, when they don't actually really know where that is, and they don't understand, they've never been to Europe, and blah blah blah. You could go on and on, couldn't you? Whereas you take the child who's been going to Europe, and since they were really young, and their parents have talked about politics at the table, and they, it's so completely different. And so that's what I mean about the system, and the way that the schools have to help those children. You've got a much bigger job helping those sorts of kids engage, haven't you? You can't expect them to
I
just
don't know.
automatically
You know what? I
engage.
don't. That's not. In some ways, that's not my experience. I worry there about sort of the expectations we're putting on students from, disadvantaged backgrounds.